Hi everyone, I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com presenting the 113th Quick Query Critique. Let's see, is there anything I need to tell you before I don't think so. I have been saying that I've got websites being revamped, so stay tuned, and I look forward to your feedback on it when we do launch it, which will be in the next month. Okay, let's get to this query letter. Dear Blank, in 1965, the music world is searching for the next Beatles, and some think they have found it in the RockIts. These four more lads from Liverpool have blasted into the top 10 with 2 #1 records. When Peter falls in love with his bandmate's cousin, he is driven to possess her, and Julie jettisons her other goals and loyalties for him. As the romance grows, it sparks conflict with everyone around them, including the band, their families, his fans, and the press. The story explores how love, fame, and loyalty alter lives and dreams. It is infused with the emerging sound of rock and roll and the Mercy beat. My 85,000-word novel, Loving RockIts, is set in London in 1965, where some still hold to the old rules and class divides, and others look to free love and psychedelic trips to change the world. The novel flashes back to the boys' visit to Ireland in the summer of 1960, where pivotal and formative events take place. I believe Loving RockIts will appeal to fans of Maeve's binge-themed novels like Circle of Friends or Tara Road. I have a particular strength in dialogue in telling a story. I read about you on Agent Query and on your website, and based on your interest in women's fiction and pop culture, I thought you might want to take a look at my recently completed novel. Per your submission guidelines, I'm including a synopsis in the first 25 pages. Thank you in advance for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely. Okay. So what do I think of Loving RockIts? Well, I think that this story is it's a little confusing to me why you would set a story at a time when the Beatles were just cooking. I mean, 1964 they came to America. This is set in 1965 when they were looking for the next Beatles. We really didn't even have the first Beatles then. So I'm a little confused by that. If you would have said 1970 or 1975, that would have made more sense to me. But in 1965, the phenomenon that we came to know as the Beatles really was not full-blown by any stretch. I was a kid then. I remember it really well. You probably were too. So that was a little confusing. And then the other thing is that this story sounds like a story that has been told often. You know, kind of the summer of love, the division between the old class and the new wave of hippies. It just seems like, you know, we've seen a lot of this on TV, in film, in books, in the media. So I'm not quite sure what it is about this novel that is unique to this story. And I don't have it here. But here's what I wonder. Is it the meat of this novel in 1960 in Ireland? That's what I wonder, because you say in the second paragraph, the last sentence, the novel flashes back to the boys' visit to Ireland in the summer of 1960, where pivotal and formative events take place. And so I wonder if that isn't your novel, or if that isn't perhaps the opening of this novel, because opening it here, at least I'm assuming that it opens here in 1965, it sounds a bit forced, that they're, you know, you're looking for the next Beatles. That sounds a little contrived, because as I said, 65 would have been way too soon to be looking for another phenomenon, because the Beatles really weren't a phenomenon yet. They were on the road to becoming one, but they certainly weren't. So that's a little confusing. I do wonder if the meat of this is in 1960 and when the boys were younger. And then when you talk about it appealing to fans of Maeve's, I've read both Circle of Friends and Tara Road, and I had a hard time making the link between her stories and this one. So I'm not quite sure that that serves you. If it does, perhaps another sentence there about that. Um, and what I want to point out to everyone who's listening to this, though, is that you have done your homework when you gave some particular information about this agent that you're querying, and information that you found on Agent Query, that said that you're pitching it to her or him because of their interest in pop culture and women's fiction. That's a good thing. So you keep that in there, because that particularizes this query letter to this agent. So it's not a a form query. This agent knows that, okay, she did some homework, and at least knows that I like women's fiction and pop culture. I'm not saying that this story doesn't have wings. It very, very well may have wings, and it may be brilliantly written, but it sounds a bit too familiar, and that's my concern, that it sounds a bit too familiar, like we've read iterations of this story in many other stories. So I'm not going to say much more than that, but I would encourage you to at least consider the feedback I gave you about 1960. I remember Barnaby Conrad, who's, was in the business and revered for many, many decades, saying to me when I opened a story in one of his workshops, he I read the chapter, and I've heard this often. Wasn't just to me, but where he listened, and it was pretty good, and he said, I like it, but I got a feeling that's not the opening of your novel. And I went, what do you mean it's not the opening? Of course it's the opening of my novel. And he said, I just got a feeling it's not the opening of your novel, so you might just want to think about that. Because when you open a novel, you want to open it with conflict, conflict, conflict. That's why we read novels. So if that summer of 1960 was pivotal and transformational, you might want to consider at least bringing that up top closer to what you've already offered us, because what you've offered us does sound a bit familiar. I hope that this is helpful. I know that that when you hear a critique of your work that isn't stellar, that it's hard to hear it, but writing is rewriting, and don't I know it? And most everyone out there knows it as well. So I hope that, again, you're able to get something from this quick query critique. And thanks for submitting it. Until the next time, be well, keep writing.